Breaking news out of Manchester today as Man United confirm officially they will be moving out of Old Trafford, a stadium they've been located at for over 100 years, to move into a new state-of-the-art stadium with 100,000 capacity by the earliest 2030. Take a look.
Manchester, a city, a stadium, a skyline, risen together. Manchester and United, forever entwined. Youth, courage, success in our blood. A glorious history, a future to be written. Where workers once grafted, a new landmark will rise. A new theatre for dreams to come alive. A design inspired by the Red Devil's trident. A modern take on our industrial roots. 100,000 fans, united as one. A place for glory, a place for pride. A sea of red, the loudest crowd. A majestic arena where history and future collide. A public space, a focal point, a catalyst for renewal. Full of hope for our fans and community. A new home for United. A new place for Manchester. A new future on familiar ground.
So, all very, very fascinating stuff. This news has, of course, taken the entire internet by storm. Man United fans have so much to say about it, and as do I. Let me disclose this first of all. I'm not an economic specialist. I'm not an economist here. Surprise! So, I see a lot of people on this fine Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday morning for some people, trying to really like break down and crunch the numbers and how is this feasible. Bro, I just watch the football games and I give my opinion on it. So as a fan, I'm looking at the stadium. First and foremost, let me say this as well too. If given the choice, I would have preferred Ineos and the ownership to kind of favor more so renovating Old Trafford, rebuilding Old Trafford, like fixing what's already there. I say that because I'm a sentimental guy when it comes to this kind of stuff. I'm a fan of stadiums that almost seem to be larger than just the sport. I'm talking the San Siro. When I learned that the San Siro was going to be taken down, or the plan was to take it down, I busted my ass to Milan to catch the Inter versus Milan derby, the Derby della Madonnina. I busted my ass to get over there, and now they're not going to take it down. But for me, it was massively important that something that iconic, I had to be there to see it. Because that is Milan and Inter. Like, that is Serie A football. That is football in general. The San Siro, that's the cathedral. Looking at what the Real Madrid have done with the Bernabeu, looking at what Barcelona have done with the Camp Nou, they're kind of rebuilding them. They're renovating them rather than just tearing them down and rebuilding new ones. Now, of course, you also have Arsenal who tore down Highbury and Spurs, what they did with White Hart Lane. Obviously, there's so many examples here. Now, me personally, I would have liked to see Old Trafford be renovated. I would have liked them to see them preserve it and fix what's already there. Because I understand that Old Trafford is decaying. I understand that it's a stadium that's been there for over 100 years. There's massive problems in terms of the roof leaking and rats infesting it. And it's an old stadium and you can tell. However, I just feel like when you're at a stadium for over 100 years, like Old Trafford is Manchester United. Manchester United is Old Trafford. Like the two of them are synonymous. It's very difficult to imagine Man United playing at any stadium at home that isn't Old Trafford. It's hard to believe because it's never happened. This was never a thing. So yeah, in that regard, if I had been given the final choice, I would have preferred that. However, I'm also not like completely stuck in my ways and so up my own ass that I think that's the only possibility that could ever be accepted as a Man United fan. Look, times change, things move on, things evolve, and you have to keep with the times. And clearly, Ineos and the club and all affiliated with it have decided that moving into a new state-of-the-art stadium in the way that they're planning on doing so is the best thing possible for the club, for the community, for the fan base, for the team. So Man United have also released a statement on their official site. Manchester United has thrown support behind the government's growth agenda by announcing its intention to pursue a new 100,000-seater stadium as the centerpiece of the regeneration of the Old Trafford area. The stadium and wider regeneration project have the potential to deliver an additional 7.3 billion per year to the UK economy, which brings large-scale social and economic benefits to the community and wider region, including the possible creation of 92,000 new jobs, more than 17,000 new homes, as well as driving an additional 1.8 million visitors annually. Now, if we're to just take a quick look at what the projection of this is supposed to look like, right? Because this is just, it is what it is. This isn't exactly what it's going to look like, but this is what they're kind of hoping to model it on. So this is New Trafford. I don't know what they're going to call it. I hope they keep the name Old Trafford, but I don't know. This is what this is what's going to look like from a long distance point of view. I think they've spoken that it'll be viewable from super far out. Like it's going to be something that you can really see from a good distance away. And these, of course, visuals courtesy of Foster Plus Partners. Now, this is interesting, right? I think when everybody heard this new stadium, I think the big fear at first was, is this just going to be another bowl? Because if you look at the new stadiums around Europe, the tendency and the pattern seems to be a bowl shape. You look at the new Bernabeu, you look at the Emirates, of course, you look at most of these stadiums. They're being modeled around like almost like a bowl. That's what they all look like these days. And I think that was the fear with Manchester United's new stadium. But this is unique. You can't tell me this isn't unique. You got to give them credit for that. Now they have this like little tent area over it, and if I read correctly, this is due to like the economic benefit, not the economic benefits, the environmental benefits, excuse me, in terms of how it absorbs like energy, and apparently it's very, very good for the environment. Very, very renewable. Now this, I guess it's supposed to symbolize the trident that the Man United logo kind of holds. This is like the three peaks of the trident. I don't know. It's like I said, it's unique. It's different. This right here, though, if you look at this area right here, this almost looks like a little spaceship up here, man. Like I was joking with Cam earlier. It's almost like this is like a Colosseum going down here. It's like the spectacle, and then like the supreme overlords are overwatching from this super high peak, just looking down. Like every time Rasmus Højlund misses a shot, he looks up and he sees Omar Berrada looking like... It's unique though. Look, it's definitely different. I don't hate it whatsoever. I think this part is cool as well too. They've spoken about how they're going to kind of renovate as well too the Trafford station, so that you're almost like from there walking directly through this giant path that leads to the stadium. This very much reminds me of Wembley Way, to the new Wembley. Very much reminds me of that. This is, I guess, the outside, what it would look like. Again, pretty cool, pretty unique as well too. Here's an overarching view as well. Again, this reminds me massively of the walkway up to Wembley Stadium. If you guys have ever been to the new Wembley, it really looks like that. And this just looks like otherworldly, to be honest with you. It looks daunting, it looks imperious. It definitely looks modern as well too. And it's unique. There's not a stadium in Europe, to my knowledge, that has something like this. So I think the fear that this could just look like any other stadium, that's quickly dissipated by these pictures. Here's another view of the outside. And I guess, again, this is all part of the idea of renovating the entire area and not just the stadium. You got a little walkway, you got a body of water here, you got a place for people to stand outside. It's not just going to be like some typical car park. Here again, you got the Manchester United Museum, I guess, Red Cafe. Again, this is all United store back here. Of course, this is all just like potential. This is like what they want to model it off of, but I think that's pretty cool. This is very, what's the word here? I think this is a very Americanized concept here in terms of like having music and bands and dancing going on the outside. Like, again, you don't really see this from football stadiums, and I think some people will kind of look at it and think, do we really need this? I kind of agree with them. Not really, in my opinion. But again, this is all kind of comes down to moving with the times, and this is where sport is going. This is where entertainment is going. This is how they want to appeal to a newer fan base as well, to build their support even further, appeal to eyes from outside of just Manchester. It's interesting. Not really for me, but I also don't represent the millions of people in this fan base. I'm just my own person. So I can see how this could be appealing for someone. This is a crazy shot. Again, like I said, this just looks like the CN Tower. Shout out Toronto, man. This looks like looks like you'd see Drake at the top of this. But bro, I'm telling you, man, you're telling me this don't look like we're all like the higher ups at Man United are gonna sit and watch. I hope Fergie can watch from up here, man. Give him back his seat. Let him watch from up here. I'm seeing 3-0. That's probably the most optimistic idea of this entire stadium. The fact that we're up 3-0. Let's hope so. Yeah, it's interesting, man. It's interesting. It looks as well too, and I think they mentioned this, that the fans are going to be very, very close to the pitch, which I think is very important. Obviously, it's not an Olympic stadium, which is just, that takes the piss, right? You look at West Ham Stadium, you have to watch that shit with binoculars. This is a little different, but I think it's cool. And yeah, those are the initial images that we've kind of got from the club. Now, if we continue reading down this statement, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, today marks the start of an incredibly exciting journey to the delivery of what will be the world's greatest football stadium at the center of a regenerated Old Trafford. Our current stadium has served us brilliantly for the past 115 years, but has fallen behind the best arenas in world sport. By building next to its existing site, we will be able to preserve the essence of Old Trafford while creating a truly state-of-the-art stadium that transforms the fan experience only footsteps from our historic home. Just as important is the opportunity for a new stadium to be the catalyst for social and economic renewal of the Old Trafford area, creating jobs and investment, not just during the construction phase, but on a lasting basis when the stadium district is complete. The government has identified infrastructure investment as a strategic priority, particularly in the north of England, and we are proud to be supporting that mission with this project of national as well as local significance. Now look, I think you guys are gathering as well as me that this isn't just a stadium that's being built here. The overall aim is to kind of rejuvenate and renovate the entirety of the area. And that's kind of like the goal of Ineos and the government, to just make this region better than it is today. And I think that's also how they're planning on funding this, right? Because the reality of the situation is Ineos cannot afford to just build the stadium from their back pockets, and they can't afford to just rely on the Glazers to do it, and they can't rely on the club's finances to do it. If that was the case, Jim Ratcliffe wouldn't have been telling us 12 hours ago that Man United are on the verge of going bust, basically. This is going to be a government-backed initiative, from what I'm understanding. And that's why I keep saying I'm staying out of the economic side of things, because this whole idea of how it's going to be funded and where the money's coming from and how it's going to kind of give back, I can just kind of only read off what they're telling us. But here's where I come in, right? I think the stadium looks sick. I think it's very cool. I think fans should be optimistic about it. I think they have every right as well too to be nostalgic about the past and the stadium that we've literally grown up watching our team play in. I get all of that, but I think it's also important to look forward to the future. And this stadium, if we are successful, will be a huge part of moving into this new era of Manchester United. It's important not to rest purely on our history. And although our history is so massive to this football club, it's important to also look forward as well too. However, my question marks come in this sense, and Omar Barad actually mentions this in some way. What shape will our football team be in by the time 2030 comes along? Because it's all well and good moving into a new state-of-the-art 100,000 capacity stadium, probably the best stadium in the world by their words, by their estimations. That's all well and good. But what's our football team going to look like at the time of moving into the stadium? Because I've always said this, as a fan, this is cool and all, but my biggest priority is my football team doing well on the pitch. That could come in a 10,000 seater stadium, that can come in 100,000. How does my football team perform week in, week out on the pitch? Now, their argument will be financially, we're in such a hole that an initiative like this is required to help us get more revenue, to help us bring in more money, to help grow the club's finances back in again, so that we can then improve the football team. And I hear that, but I just hope for the next 5 years, as we wait for 2030, our football team, which is already at a pretty low level, doesn't continue to massively dwindle and fall and fall and fall. And by the time we move in 2030, we are just a complete disarray. That's really my big hope here, or that's my biggest fear here. And Omar Barada speaks about it briefly. He says, our long-term objective as a club is to have the world's best football team playing in the world's best stadium. We are grateful for the feasibility work done by the Old Trafford Regeneration Task Force, exploring options for the future of Old Trafford. So again, I ask, you want the best football team playing in the world's best stadium, but what has to come first? The world's best football team or the world's best football stadium? It's almost like the chicken or the egg. Which one is first? With Real Madrid, they were already a really good team. And they had some financial issues. And they took a financial hit in terms of spending in the 2-3 years while they were renovating the Bernabeu. And now that the Bernabeu is built, it brings in so much revenue. It's made them much more profitable. And Real Madrid are in a healthy position financially. In part, large part, due to the stadium. But they already had a really good football team before that. I look at Arsenal when they moved into the Emirates. Good football team, moved into the Emirates, cost them a lot of money. It hurt them financially to the point they were basically having to take footballing losses in terms of selling their best players and not basically replacing them with top established players. It killed Arsenal, in my opinion, for the next 10-15 years. And this was an initiative moving into the Emirates that was supposed to build them as a football team. Those were the words in 2002 when they decided to move into the Emirates. Like when they officially announced that by 2006, we'll be moving to the Emirates. Their words were, we want to build a football stadium that can have one of the world's best footballing teams that can compete with the likes of Bayern Munich and Real Madrid. Look at Arsenal post that. Spurs, another good example. Good footballing team when they moved into their new stadium. But again, it hurt them. The first year, they didn't spend a single dime. Spurs have never been a team that have been able to spend massive amounts of money in the transfer window post moving into that stadium. And yes, they have a brilliant stadium, but if the football team is consistently languishing in ninth place, what good is having an amazing house if all the furniture inside is shit? That's my big fear here. So for Manchester United, it's all well and good talking about this best stadium in the world, and this is going to be here, and we're gonna have a fan park here, and the area is going to be thriving, and there's gonna be so many jobs for everyone, which is brilliant. I'm not against that whatsoever, and it's going to help the club from a financial point of view. But what state will our football team be in by the time 2030 comes along? That's my biggest concern here. And I don't think I'm wrong to be asking that, because I think a lot of fans are probably thinking the same thing as well too. It's all well and good being in a great stadium, but no one wants to see their team be shit. So I really hope that this works hand in hand with the continued improvement of our football team. And I say continued. We got to start somewhere. We haven't even started to say we can continue. And that kind of leads in to the conversation that we heard last night between Jim Ratcliffe and Gary Neville. Now, I was meant to make a whole video talking about that interview and watching it with you guys, but since the stadium news came out, I've kind of put that on the back burner, and I've decided let's just kind of talk about the main talking points from that interview, right? First and foremost, Sir Jim Ratcliffe spoke to Gary Neville on the latest episode of The Overlap in a one-on-one exclusive interview where Jim Ratcliffe spoke about the last year that Ineos have owned the club, some of the decisions that he's made. He talked about the Glazers, he talked about Erik ten Hag and Dan Ashworth, and he talked about plans going forward regarding ticket prices, meals, and charities. And I'll be real, right? I don't really know what to make of it. I've seen some people praise the interview. I've seen some people be extremely critical of the interview. I've seen some people be extremely critical of Gary Neville, which, to be honest with you, I think is misdirected. I actually thought Gary Neville executed a pretty good interview, and I think he pushed hard on certain points, which I was happy to see him do. And I thought Jim Ratcliffe was good in some of his answers, but in some other answers, I thought he kind of took the easy way out, quite personally. Now, I guess the first talking point here is the ticket prices. And no, you know what? The first talking point is the finances. He basically stated, Jim Ratcliffe, that if the club kind of didn't do what they were supposed to do, or do what they did do in terms of ticket prices and lunches and offloading players and letting players go on loan, Man United would have ran out of money by 2025. In fact, he even disclosed that the £300 million he initially invested in the club, he initially kind of put in the club, it's already gone. It's already been ate up. Long story short, he effectively disclosed that Man United, as we all know, is in a financial hell. They are in financial ruin. That's not a secret. He disclosed as well, too, that this summer alone, forget about players coming in, players going out, they will already be paying, I think, 89 million pounds, I think they said, in terms of the fees remaining from Rasmus Højlund, Casemiro, Antony, Lisandro Martinez, players that they bought in the last few windows that they still are kind of paying off because they buy in investments, which kind of shows you the ruin that they took over from a year ago. That, again, none of that is really surprising. That's all been disclosed to us. I thought the really interesting bit was his reasoning for the ticket prices and his reasoning for the charity. And at one point, Gary Neville asked this guy, like, on the subject of taking away the charities that go to ex-Man United players, could you not have kept those funds for those ex-players that do so much for the community and have been huge servants to the club? Couldn't you have found a different way about it? Maybe hosting a dinner with Bruno Fernandes and Harry Maguire, sell 1,000 seats to or 1,000 tickets to fans for £40 a ticket, and that £40,000 that you generate from that event, give it to the ex-players. And Sir Jim Ratcliffe's reply to that was, no one suggested that, Gary. If someone had suggested that, I would have loved that idea. Excuse me? My good brother, you are the owner. You're the one making the decisions. Why didn't you think of that? And that's kind of the feeling I had throughout a lot of this interview, right? Jim Ratcliffe is talking about the problems at the club. He's talking about what's wrong. He's talking about what he inherited. He's talking about everything, right? But it's all good and well me talking about the issues at the club, right? But I don't have any power to kind of change those issues. He's the owner. What are you doing to fix those issues? And his reply, I guess, will be, well, that's where the ticket prices going up comes in, and that's where cutting down on staff lunches will come into play, and that's where the charities will come. I guess that's his excuse for what I'm doing to fix this. But then you also have the things that you tried fixing where you have completely fell flat on your face, and he did mention them. He talked about keeping Erik ten Hag just to fire him a few months later. He described that as a mistake and he apologized for it. Talked about Dan Ashworth, that being a mistake, and apologizing for that. But those are big financial hits that probably also accelerated the need to cut down on staff lunches and probably also accelerated the need to cut down, to increase ticket prices. If you hadn't messed up in such a huge regard in the first place with that stuff, would the urgency in which you had to increase ticket prices and cut staff lunches, would that have become such a priority? You took over a rotten situation, but did you add to the rot? I think there's an argument to be made that he, along with Ineos, kind of did that. And I guess this is all stuff that's already happened, so there's no real point in me dwelling on it, right? Eric Ten Hag happened. Dan Ashworth happened. But I find it really difficult to kind of just say, oh, it was a mistake, I apologize. Guys, that mistake cost us our season this year. That mistake ended Man United's season before a ball was even kicked. How different could the season potentially have looked if the keys to the transfer window, which he mentioned, Eric Ten Hag still had a huge part to play in, and he name-dropped basically the Dutch players and the ex-Ajax players. He had a huge part to play in. Dan Ashworth had a huge part to play in. How different could our season potentially have looked if you had made the right decision? And I understand it's a 50-50 choice here, right? Sack Ten Hag, keep Ten Hag. Chose the wrong option. But these are options that make or break football clubs. They make or break seasons. And ultimately, you talk about the huge financial hole that we're in, might have made or broken our financial situation this year. Now, I'll always continue to say this, right? I do feel a level of sympathy for Ineos because, look, the last 10 years, I would say the last 20 years, 10 years is just without a trophy. But even under Sir Alex, we were basically operating like an unserious football club at board level and at financial level. The Glazers have been putting this club in a rut for the last 20 years. So Ineos are not only trying to take care of the problems for this year, they're trying to basically eradicate problems that have been building in a rut for over 20 years. And that's where I hold an air of sympathy for them, because what the Glazers have done to this club is unforgivable. It's practically illegal. I don't think you could undergo a takeover like they did in the year 2025. But I need to see a lot more going forward. And this talk of a new stadium, it's not talk anymore. It's a reality. We will be moving into a new stadium. I like it. And that's always been, I'm sure, their plan. Like this whole idea that they were going to renovate Old Trafford, I've never really been of the belief that's what they were going to do. Those are great steps in terms of rebuilding Man United as a global powerhouse from a financial point of view, from a commercial point of view. But from a footballing point of view, I still remain, ladies and gentlemen, extremely concerned about the direction our club is kind of going in. And I'm really concerned that by the time we enter 2030 into this amazing stadium, it could very well be a Spurs situation where, yeah, it's a great football stadium. Everyone wants to go see it until the 90-minute kicks off. And the football team playing in that stadium is just as average as they were at the one prior. Don't want to sound like a doomer. I think this is cool news. I think the stadium looks sick. I'm not completely like in tears that Old Trafford's not going to exist anymore. I'm definitely going to make the most of it as I can in these next 5 years, go as many times as I can, because sometimes I think we do take it for granted, right? I remember the first time I went to Old Trafford nearly 10 years ago now, right? Like, I was obviously much younger, but I genuinely felt like a kid going to that stadium. It was like all my dreams coming true. So I'm definitely going to make more of an effort to go to as many games as I can, because I think sometimes I do take it for granted. Because I remember little Lyes, who lived in New York, if you had told him he could go to Old Trafford whenever he wanted, his eyes would have lit up. So that's definitely going to be a goal for me going forward in these next 5 years. But Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Ineos, Omar Barada, all these men, what's the goal? What's the objective? What's the plan to improve the on-pitch stuff? We'll see. I think this season is kind of a rut, as I've already said. I think we can kind of chalk it off. Europa League, let's go and see what happens long-term with that, or I guess what happens in the next few months with that. But it's all about looking forward to Man United. Let's try and be a little positive. This is good news. It's not bad news. I see a lot of people trying to be doomers about this. This is better news than it is bad news. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Do you like the new stadium? Would you have rather stayed in Old Trafford? Do you have any qualms about what Sir Jim Ratcliffe said yesterday? And what's your overall sentiment towards Man United and the ownership at the moment? Like, share, subscribe, guys. I'll be back tonight with Champions League. Check me out on Twitch. I'll be doing a watch along for the Liverpool PSG game second leg. And I'll see you guys very, very soon. Peace.